And now chapter 4, Hard Times. The wind lashed the bare trees and swept the snow into the tall drifts. That way, said Annie. She led the way down the castle steps to the path. Mr. Perkins was a nice guy, said Annie, as they headed toward the west side of the park. Yeah, said Jack. Someday I'd like to go back there and see all his weather instruments. Jack and Annie trudged through the storm until they saw buildings just beyond the trees. We're almost out of Central Park, Annie said. Jack looked around. Do you see Teddy and Kathleen, he said. No, but we better keep going if we want to get to the zoo today, said Annie. Jack agreed. Mr. Perkins had said that the blizzard was going to turn into a monster after dark, and dark came early in November. They led the park and came to a wide city street. All sorts of things were blowing around in the wind. Newspapers, hats, and umbrellas turned inside out. Jack and Annie grabbed a lamppost and clung to it, trying to keep from being blown away, too. When there was a lull in the storm, they trudged across the avenue. It was lined with cars half buried in the snow. Jack and Annie started down a side street. They passed an old man and woman huddled in a doorway, wrapped in torn blankets, burning a fire in a small stove. They passed a line of men dressed in ragged clothes standing outside a building. A sign said, "Free soup." Jack hoped everyone outside would find better shelter before the monster blizzard hit. Excuse me, Annie called to the men in line for the free soup. Do you know where the West Side IRT subway is? 2 blocks, said a man. Keep going. Thanks, said Annie. Jack and Annie kept going. They passed a firehouse, a cheese store, and a newsstand. Everything was closed and shuttered. Peddlers' carts were stuck in drifts. Signs banged in the wind. One said, "Meatballs and beans, 10 cents." Another said, "Zito's Bakery, 5 cents a loaf." A third said, "Lodging, $2 a week." Jack and Annie crossed the street. They saw newsboys huddled under a theater awning. The boys had wrapped their feet and legs in newspapers to keep warm. "Excuse me, where's the subway?" Jack shouted. "End of the block and around the corner." "Green ball," said a boy. "Green ball," wondered Jack. "What does that mean?" "Thanks," said Annie. "You guys should go home. After dark, the storm's turning into a monster." Jack and Annie trudged on. When they turned the corner, Annie shouted, "Look, a green ball." On top of a post was a large green ball. The post was next to a stairway that led underground. A sign said, "Uptown IRT trains 1, 2, 3. "That's it. Mr. Perkins said we take the number 2, said Annie. "Wait, do you see Teddy and Kathleen?" said Jack, peering through the snow. Annie looked with him down the city street. "I don't see them, but I'm sure they'll find us," said Annie. She and Jack started down the stairs that led underground. The stairway was filled with people trying to get out of the storm. Jack and Annie walked with the crowd into the subway station. A long line waited in front of a turnstile. A sign over the turnstile said, "Subway, 5 cents." "Oops, do you have any money for the subway?" Annie asked Jack. "Yeah, I think I left home with at least $1 in change," said Jack. He reached into his pocket and pulled out 2 nickels. "Cool," said Annie. She led the way to the line. As they waited, Jack looked around the station. A banjo player played a silly tune, but no one smiled. A man in rags walked around holding out a hat, begging for money. Jack took another nickel from his pocket and dropped it into the hat. Thank you, bless you," said the beggar. "Sure," said Jack. As the beggar walked on, Jack looked at Annie. "Boy, just a little nickel made him so happy," he said. "I know. Everyone seems really poor and desperate here," said Annie. "I wonder why," said Jack. While the line moved slowly toward the turnstile, he pulled out the research book and read aloud from the introduction. In the 1930s, New York City, as well as the rest of the United States, suffered through hard times known as the Great Depression. Jobs were scarce, and many people had no money or homes. "That's what Mr. Perkins was talking about," said Jack. "Hard times." "I wish we could help everyone," said Annie. "Me too," said Jack. "But right now, our mission is to save a unicorn under a spell," said Annie. Jack frowned. "Our mission sounds like a fairy tale from a make-believe world," he said. "Not the real world of the Great Depression." "I know," said Annie. "Hey, it's almost our turn. What do we do?" "Let's watch the person in front of us," said Jack. Jack and Annie watched an old woman put her nickel in the slot of the turnstile, which led to the train platform. The woman pushed through and joined the crowd of people waiting for the train. Jack and Annie put their nickels into the slot and pushed through too. The platform was bitterly cold. People looked worried, as if they feared the subway train might never come. Jack felt worried too, but mainly because their mission wasn't making any sense. They were trying to get to the zoo before the blue moon and before a monster blizzard hit the city. But when they got to the zoo, what then? "This is what I don't understand," Jack said to Annie. "The poem says the unicorn is on public display. But if that's true, why haven't we ever read about New York City once having a unicorn in a zoo? That would be major news." "Yeah, but remember, the poem said he's hidden well and he's under a spell," said Annie. So maybe the spell makes him look like a regular animal. But when we get to the zoo and say his name, he'll come out of hiding and reveal his true nature, said Jack. Exactly, said Annie. Okay, said Jack, but how will we know what kind of animal to look for? A signal bell clanged. Lights appeared at the end of the tunnel. Jack and Annie moved with the crowd as it surged forward. The subway train rumbled down the tracks. On the side of the train, Jack saw a big number 2. That's us, he said. When the train stopped, everyone on the platform crammed inside. Jack and Annie were squashed into one of the first cars. All the seats were taken, so they had to stand in the aisle. They held onto a silver pole as more riders squeezed into the subway car and grabbed straps hanging overhead. Jack actually didn't mind the tight squeeze. He was anxious to thaw out from the cold. Look, Jack, cried Annie. She pointed out a window of the subway car. Jack peered out the window just in time to see 2 people rush across the platform toward one of the rear cars. One was dressed in a dark cape, the other in a tan raincoat. A bell sounded. The subway doors closed and the train started down the tracks. Yay, they're on the train, exclaimed Annie. Cool, said Jack, grinning. We'll see them when we get off. Hey, where do we get off, said Annie. Oh man, we forgot to ask, said Jack. He turned to the lady next to them. Excuse me, where do we get off for the Bronx Zoo, he asked her. Tremont Avenue, the woman said gruffly. Where's that, asked Annie. There's a map, said the woman. She pointed to a map on the wall above a row of seated passengers. Jack and Annie stared at all the colorful lines that showed the subway system. Nothing here makes sense, said Jack. Do you need help? The girl sitting under the map asked. She wore a tattered purple shawl over her head and shoulders. Yes, please, said Annie. Can you tell us where we get off for the Bronx Zoo? It's much further north, said the girl. I'll let you know when we get to the right stop. Thanks, said Jack. The train bumped and creaked along, stopping every couple of minutes. Jack looked out the window and tried to read the name of each station, but sometimes the platforms were too crowded. He was glad the girl in the shawl had promised to help them. Just when Jack was starting to feel warm and a little drowsy, the girl called out, Your stop's next. Thanks a lot, said Annie. She and Jack squeezed through the crowd toward the doors. When the train stopped and the doors opened, Jack and Annie were practically pushed out onto the platform with the other people leaving. The subway doors closed and the train moved on. All right, Jack and Annie are heading to the zoo. Will they find the unicorn there? We'll have to keep reading to find out.